Related to all this is the third lesson: how we can strengthen our resilience as a nation. Our COVID-19 experience has been a stark reminder of our vulnerability. As a small and open economy, we were more badly hit than others by a global disruption that was outside of our control. We found ourselves in situations where it was uncertain whether we could secure critical supplies even when we were willing to pay a premium for them. In the early months of the pandemic, we witnessed how other countries had started hoarding essential medical and food supplies, and we grew increasingly concerned about whether we could replenish our own stock. Significant work had to be undertaken to activate emergency procurement measures and to tap on long-standing networks to secure what we needed. We also had to design new processes to keep our port and land links open, but in a safe way. So the pandemic has underscored the importance of building up additional redundancies and buffers that we can fall back upon during a crisis. And Minister Gan Kim Yong will elaborate on these efforts, including our stockpiling strategies, diversification of supply chains for essential items, and expansion of local production where this makes sense. Besides having additional buffers, resilience is also about being more adaptable. We must be able to marshal our existing assets and resources quickly and be nimble enough to move fast when the unexpected happens. For example, when we first managed to bring protein and meat supplies into Singapore, which we had to do, there was an issue of where to store these goods. MTI scrambled. This was under Minister Chan then, when he was at MTI, and we eventually solved this by sourcing and bringing in refrigerated containers, what they call reefers, to provide sufficient cold storage capacity, and we ramped up the capacity of the power supply to support their operations. Where possible, the government will design facilities to be multi-use so that they can be repurposed or redeployed during a crisis. In particular, we will apply further thought into how we can enhance the resilience of our public infrastructure, especially for new major projects like Tuas Megaport and the Changi Airport Terminal 5. We also need to be able to convert and repurpose existing spaces at short notice into facilities that can be used to meet emergency needs in a crisis. We had faced a steep learning curve trying to do this at the start. Singapore Expo had to be converted into community isolation and care facilities, hotels into quarantine facilities, community centers into vaccination centers, vacant schools and SAF camps into temporary housing for migrant workers. Each of these processes took a lot of work, and learning from this experience, we will continue to build up our capabilities so that we can pivot and respond more effectively in future. Our private sector partners are a key source of support in these efforts. Working alongside them over the course of the pandemic has showed us all that there is much more that we can do by coming together, by sharing our resources, capabilities, and networks. So we will do more to sustain and strengthen our partnerships with the private sector. For example, through cooperation agreements, to shore up our pandemic preparedness plans and to mobilize our national resources more comprehensively in times of need. One crucial resource that enabled us to respond effectively and bounce back quickly in this pandemic was our financial reserves. Indeed, our reserves is an integral part of our national resilience. It shielded our economy and our people from the harshest impact of the pandemic, and it remains our best safeguard in any crisis. It is therefore our duty to ensure that the reserves are used prudently and judiciously so that future generations can continue to benefit from it. Ultimately, what lies at the heart of our resilience is our people, because that's our most important defense in a pandemic, to be psychologically prepared, to stay united, and to support one another and keep faith with each other. Throughout this pandemic, Singaporeans were socially responsible and responded to the calls for self-discipline with admirable fortitude and patience. We saw a strong communitarian spirit and a high level of volunteerism. Many ground projects were initiated to rally the community in support of those who needed help. COVID-19 brought out the best in all of us, individually and collectively. Despite the pressures and fears, we did not give in, we did not succumb. We stood firmly together and left no one behind. That is a mark of our growing maturity and resilience as a people and as a nation. Mr. Speaker, in this debate, I invite everyone to reflect on how far we have come over the last 3 years. It has been an emotional journey of ups and downs for all of us, in the same way that our response has had its fair share of setbacks and successes. In the end, it was the whole nation coming together that made the difference in our fight against COVID-19, allowing us to surmount the odds and face the challenges without fear. So the aim of this white paper and this debate is not to rate the government's or Singapore's performance in this pandemic. We have done our best, and that's what matters. In the final analysis, the long arc of history will judge how well we have responded to this crisis of a generation and how well we have learned and remembered the lessons of COVID-19. Today, we are here to give thanks, for we have found our way through the pandemic and emerged from it intact and strengthened. We are here to pay tribute to all who have made countless sacrifices and worked so hard to get us through this crisis. We are here to learn, improve, and be better prepared when the next pandemic comes. I hope we will not have to go through an episode like COVID-19 again. Unfortunately, we would have to be very lucky for my hope to be fulfilled. The next pandemic can happen sooner rather than later, and quite possibly will be worse than COVID-19. But if it does happen, we can draw confidence and strength from what we have been through these past 3 years. Let us always remember the most important lesson of COVID-19, that we are stronger when we stand and work together. So let us resolve to stay united so that whatever the challenges ahead, we can overcome them as one people and one Singapore. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move.